Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest who has been here before various times. Radhia Gleis, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Arash? Thanks for having me again.
I'm awesome. So you don't really need an introduction, but I just want our audience to know you're the author of the book, The Followers, Holy Hell, and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders. And you have the second edition out. So what has been added on? What's the difference here between the first and the second edition?
It's actually, I did a lot of, the first edition is really long. And so in the reviews I was getting, I wanted to help my readers out a little bit. So I culled out a few chapters. I changed some names in there that needed to be changed. There were some people that came to light that I really were not going to endorse, so I removed them from the book. And I just, I worked with my editor to just basically pare down some of the details because, Arash, history is moving, as I say in my book, faster than a stenographer on crystal meth, So things have changed a lot, I mean, God, it changes every day. And so I put more new stuff that's going on in history, going on in this country, took out stuff that it's like everybody knows at this point. So that's kind of what I did. I just sort of re-edited it.
Yeah, it used to be a time where there was a status quo, where things would remain somewhat stagnant or similar. And now we see like every day things are changing. And it's insane. The breakneck speed is insane.
Yeah, it's just insane. We're seeing just jaw-dropping things happening in this country and in the world that, I guess it's not really new, but the thing is that media is so fast nowadays that what would take maybe a year for you to get the information on, what's happening in politics and things like that. Now it's like seconds.
It's hard to keep track. It feels like the world is on steroids, and it's like so many things coming all at once, and try to make sense of it all. That's pretty tough.
And it's true. And I think also that we're getting a shorter attention span. Like when I first wrote the book, I have so much more to say, and my editor said, "Radhia, you can't put everything into this book, I'm like, but it may be the last. It's not. I'm writing a few others right now, but she said, you can always write addendums in articles, you don't have to cram it all in one book. So that was kind of what we were, I'm trying to pare down to the demographic that really wants things faster.
And I also want to mention that you were on Netflix on How to Become a Cult Leader. You were on the third episode, and congrats to that. It's great to see you. So you're taking on television and streaming services as well.
I know, right? I was first in the documentary Holy Hell, which is what sort of triggered me to write my book. And then Netflix got a hold of Will Allen, the director. He's still in Los Angeles. He's still editing and doing other work in Hollywood. So his producer and the producer at Netflix, they knew each other. And they said, we saw Holy Hell. It's like incredible. We really want to get in touch with these people. And so they got a hold of Will and they said, who would be good for what we want to do? And he said, well, I think you should talk to Radhia. And she's also got a book out. And she's got for what they're trying to do. I had a pretty educated kind of perspective on what they were trying to show. Of course, those Netflix series are so short I think that they were very good. I think that they, with the use of animation and humor and whatever, I think that they were well received. Again, there is your audience that wants it real short, wants it easy to digest, And so, of course, they interviewed me for, I don't know, like any other interview for hours and hours, and then they cherry picked out what they needed, which is fine. However, there's a lot more to the comments I may be making. It's a full conversation.
Out of context at all? Did you find that was the case, or was it overall?
That's a good question. I'd have to go back and review it, but I think that their choices, there were other things that they could have chosen that I think would have been a better fit to make their point.
What is the point? I mean, we get insight into the cults and how they work and leaders. And I want to talk a bit more about that because it brought back, I've seen Holy Hell, the documentary, it's been a while, but it brought back some of these ideas too. I was like wondering about things. I want to dive into that a bit more too. But how to become a cult leader? Is that like kind of an instruction manual for others? It's like, if you want to become a cult leader, watch our series and you can take some pointers, or what do you think was the purpose here?
No, it's done very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
The whole Netflix series, I was saying to you before we went on that I really liked the series, especially this was season 2. I really liked season 1 because that was how to become a tyrant. And it was giving which I think every single American should see. They should see the whole series. But every American should see how to become a tyrant, because even though they didn't use what's happening in the United States today, they used all the other great tyrants, and from Hitler to Mussolini to whatever, and they all have a playbook. Yeah. And they all do the same things, right?
Yeah.
And so what their point was in both the first season and the second season was, here's the playbook, right? So it was sort of their title is sort of a tongue-in-cheek, because it's so formulaic, because it's the same patterns as what my book was, which was, here's excerpts from the diagnostic manual of mental disorders, right? And here's where this person did it, and here's where this person did the exact same description. So it's not even that all of these tyrants and all of these cult leaders, which are also tyrants, it's just a smaller society, But here's where they followed the same playbook. They all do. And so I guess, what they were using, some people, like I was reading the reviews on the second season, and some people were offended at the humor. They were offended at being flippant about Jim Jones, or flippant about being, what the atrocities that went on with Charlie Manson, et cetera. And I can understand that. I mean, I can. And I said to you before we started, our little hippie community was episodically lodged between Jim Jones and Charlie Manson. That's
heavyweights. Yeah.
That's a bit outrageous to me, It really is, because it wasn't you, but I was interviewed I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and I don't remember who it was, but they were somewhat disappointed in our group that there were no suicides or murders.
Oh my God.
They really were. They were disappointed.
There was a lot of fascinating stuff. I want to get into that, so that there is actually, it was even like plastic surgery and ballet performances and so on. So all this kind of came back as a watch. It's like, this is completely insane. And so, but the thing is also, what is a good thing, and you talked about the playbook, I think a lot of it is recycled. Sometimes even the same slogans are used again, and just like with minor additions there and changes. But it raises awareness so that hopefully once we have this knowledge, we can recognize it and we can call out people on it and say, hey, wait a minute, what you're doing is this. I'm not going to fall for that. one of the things I've noted with like cult leaders and narcissistic leaders like that, there's always a double standard. You do, but I will do other. You be celibate, but I won't be, right? So, and that is going on in various levels and so on. And we see it with politicians, political leaders, cult leaders, and so on.
The hypocrisy is just
it's
gross.
Hypocrisy, exactly.
Yeah. But the thing is that, that's the fallacy with these leaders, is that they're pathological liars, all of them. Every one of them across the board are pathological liars. And so the followers do not know that the leader is not practicing what he's preaching.
Yeah.
So, when you say, well, everyone was celibate and he didn't have to be. Well, according to him, he was celibate. And he expounded on how he, let go of that. The frustrating thing, Arash, was that the people that he was sexually assaulting were sitting in the room while he was saying that. And they didn't come forward and say, you're a liar. You just fucked me last night, I mean, that's the reason why when I wrote my book, when I first wrote, the working title to my book was Duped, right? Mm-hmm. Because we were duped. Everybody in these groups are duped. They're lied to. They're manipulated. With him, he used all kinds of parlor tricks, right? So yes, we were duped. But then as I was going through it and reading it and analyzing my own journey, I was going, yeah, you know what? We were duped. Yeah. And people who have interviewed me, they say, oh, Radhia, you seem so intelligent. And what they're saying is, oh, we were really expecting a gullible fool. Like many of them say to me, well, that would have never happened to me, right? And I always say to them, do you really think that the millionaires and the lawyers who got duped by Bernie Madoff were stupid or uneducated?
Good point. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the narcissist figuring out what you want. And then by hook or by crook, by fantasy or pathological lying or creating the world, they give it to you, right? So, why didn't you lead for 25 years? Because I really was, for the most part, enjoying my life. There was a lot of value to it, right? So that's the thing that I didn't like about the Netflix representation of our situation. First of all, they seem to emphasize that it was all plastic surgery and everyone had to do ballet and what. That is a bunch of nonsense, utter ridiculous, right? And many of us, like, I think there was a handful. So if there was 150 people, maybe 5 were doing kinds of, Botox and things like that. I happen to know, would never go under the knife. He may have implants and Botox and whatever. But when you say plastic surgery, it sounds like he's having facelifts and he's, as far as I know, now, after all these years, I may not know, but I was pretty close, right? And I know that if he were doing that, he'd be out of commission for at least a couple weeks because he'd be all black and blue and whatever. He never was. So I think that Netflix really took that way over the edge. That wasn't what we were about. Most people did not know about the plastic surgery or anything like that for 10 years after we left. We found out about it. A lot of us found out about it when Will did the video. It's like, so that wasn't our life. That wasn't.
And they're not open, right? They're not open. They're not showing all the sides. They're showing only a part that they think you need to see, and they're manipulating it. It's not like you have here an open person. But I love this Wikipedia description of him last time I checked, of the Buddhafield cult leader. And he's known to wear nothing but swim briefs and eyeliner. And is that correct? Because on the documentary, as I remember, that was the case. And so that is already pretty odd to start up with.
Okay, so that's also bullshit.
Okay.
That's nonsense, right? Okay, so what happened was, Will, even when Will was interviewing me for Holy Hell, he interviewed 4.5 hours, 4.5 hours at least of me and everybody else. So, you probably know, when you're producing a video and a film or a video, and you've got producers and you've got people who want to sell this.
Yeah.
Okay. They're the ones that want it to be salacious. They want it to be, odd. They want it to be all these things, right? So even Will, he got me, and I say it in both, actually. I talk about when he lost an eyelash on his chin and whatever. That was a 30-second conversation out of 4.5 hours, a lot deeper stuff. So I want to address the Speedos. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Because it seems prominent. I have been interviewed.
From the documentaries. It seems prominent. It seems quite prominent.
Prominent.
Like a lot of scenes.
That's all they talk about.
Yeah.
And in these conversations, I've been interviewed all through the United States. I've been interviewed in the UK, in Australia, South Africa, all the English-speaking countries, right? They always bring up the Speedos. Yeah. I have read, Speedo-wearing guru, all the articles open with that. Yeah. So let me talk about that. I'm really glad everybody's bringing that up, right? Yeah. First of all, the guy is not from America. So if you were French or on the French Riviera or whatever, that's what you would be wearing. Okay. It was not unusual for him. He's from Venezuela. That was the swimming attire that you wear in any other country but the United States. The United States is the biggest crock of prudes. And why that matters, it doesn't matter. But there was another thing. He had a real thing about tanning, right? And he didn't want tan lines. That's why he wore Speedos. One, because he wore Speedos his whole life because he's from Venezuela and Europe, right? But he also didn't want tan lines. He also swam every day. So it wasn't like he ran around like that when he wasn't swimming. No, he did not. When he was sunning, when he was tanning, or when he was swimming, like when we were at the lake, we wherever we went, one of the criteria for wherever we moved from Los Angeles to Austin. The criteria, in Los Angeles, we went to the beach almost every day, right? So we did a lot of our work at the beach, right? When we moved to Austin, Austin has got a lot of water. It's got Lake Travis, which is 80 miles in circumference, and it's got all these, rivers and tributaries everywhere. That's one of the criterias of us moving to Austin. So when you see these footage, which this is what Will had, he had archival footage. Yeah, you're seeing us on outings, Is that every day and 24/7 nonsense? But they just, I said to one person that was interviewing me, I said, it sounds like an insult about Speedos. It just was so constant bringing up the Speedos nonsense. It just happened to be the footage that he had all the time because he was the videographer for the group. So the best time to get us is when we were all together out in nature, right? So yeah, he was dressed to go swimming, but he didn't wear that all day, every day. That's nonsense.
And not for the ballet performance either, right? So that wouldn't work, ballet and Speedo.
Okay, so out of 150, there was probably 20 people that danced. Mm-hmm. And I was the set designer for all these ballets. And I bring this up in my book. No, not everyone danced, right? But there was a couple things that one has to realize. he was in the Oakland Ballet. He's a big ballet fan, huge. And he was a dancer himself. Also, he worked out every day. I mean, he was major body conscious, right? Which we were doing things that are now fads, right? At the gym, which in those days was, it really was few and far between. Eating healthy, going to the gym, working out, being athletic, swimming, all of that other stuff. Not only was it, from his spiritual perspective, which I still agree with and subscribe to, this is your temple, right? If you're going to disrespect this by eating a lot of crap and, doing nothing and lying around, being, lazy and slovenly and whatever, you are not presenting your highest self, right? So that was part of it. Also, from an energetic standpoint, I mean, we were doing things that are popular today 40 years ago. No gluten, no dairy, no caffeine, no alcohol, no sugar, no whatever. And it wasn't, you have to do this. It became that. But originally, it was a conversation about this is the best way to maintain your purest energy. Our whole thing was meditation based, and it was these particular 4 techniques of meditation, of which he stole from another guru, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, so the 4 techniques of the meditation, some people understand words like Kundalini, some people understand words like prana, etc. Okay? Those are just forms of, vibration that occurs in certain meditation states. So originally, his idea was to keep your body as pure as possible so that you don't, if you want the highest experience, you don't interfere with things that are going to lower it, make you sleepy, make you tired, make you whatever. So there was a method to his madness. It wasn't all, oh, yes, master. It was like, yeah, this makes perfect sense, especially for me. I'm a clinical nutritionist, right? Most of us were either practitioners, chiropractors, yoga instructors, nutritionists like myself, chefs, really in the holistic field in the first place. That's how we made our living. And we made our living in the world. We were not cloistered in some monastery. So I had my own practice. Many people did have their own practices. And so we were living the life in a community that was all in support of each other. That's one of the reasons why it was so hard to leave, because we knew you go out there on your own and try and be disciplined with your diet and with your whatever, good luck. It did become
a community, right? And you identify with
we were a community.
Part of who you are. That makes it, again, difficult to leave it. But what about the identity? Was there, again, trying to change? Because a lot of times we see there's the changing of names. You take on a different identity. Was that tampered with? And to what extent would you say that was going on?
The identity thing, you have to understand from where the philosophy was coming from. This was at a time where we first started it. It started in Florida, but primarily the larger part of the group started in Los Angeles. Los Angeles in the late 70s, early 80s, there was so many things going on. There was a cult on every block. But new thinking was a part of it. And so there was a lot of Eastern religion or Eastern philosophy that was being embedded, especially in the culture in Los Angeles. We were hippies, basically. So one of the important things about it was originally it had nothing to do with him. It had to do with enlightenment and attaining enlightenment. So we were reading a lot of books from Eastern-oriented teachers, Paramahansa Yogananda, Ramana Maharshi, Ananda Moyama, all of these great writers and teachers from India mostly, but also Sufi, Buddha, So we were reading a lot of Eastern philosophy and and it made more sense to us than the dogma of Western Christianity. So we were trying to move away from that. So the idea originally was these 4 techniques. It had nothing to do with him. But as we started to read these things, we were reading the relationship between the disciple and the master. And that is in every one of these books. It's about the disciple-master relationship. Excuse me, but it is also in Christianity, right? Jesus was the master, right? And he had disciples. Same kind of relationship. So in the beginning, we didn't look at Jaime as being a god. I didn't, right? And neither did some of the earlier people. He was a teacher. He had these techniques. He had a way of living this life that we were emulating. We wanted to support that. This is what happens in all groups. Once you get somebody who's got narcissistic tendencies and you start feeding them that, he was not like that in the beginning. He was, his whole slogan was connect to God's love, and I will show you how. But he used to say, but this has nothing to do with me. This is your birthright. This is who you are, and this is your relationship with God. I'm just here to give you the techniques and to teach you how to live the highest life you can. And that's what it started out to be. So it started out to be connect to God's love in this meditation, in this action, in whatever. After a while, it changed to no longer connect to God's love, connect to my love. Yeah. So suddenly he became a deity. And he started seeing himself that way. So,
in a way, it's the power that kind of corrupts, because he might have started off, maybe, that's just assuming, as in an okay way. But once he had that power, he said, wait a minute, I can satisfy my narcissistic tendencies here, and I can use and manipulate and abuse others.
It's absolutely true. Power corrupts. And the book that I'm working on right now, is called Harder to Fall, The Addiction of Power and Money. And it is about, I had a lot of experience with addicts, not only as a practitioner, but also I was in a relationship with an addict for 20 years. So I began to do a lot of research on addiction. And I don't care whether it's addiction to, gambling or sex or drugs or alcohol or power or money. Once you get that, it's harder to fall. It's really hard to come down. And so the reason why I'm writing this, Arash, is because when we're looking at the madness going on in this country and thinking, why are people literally selling their souls for these positions? Because they're addicted. And it is a neurochemical addiction, as powerful as a drug addiction. And so that's the book I'm working on right now. And so I watched him start to feed off his own, and we fed him. We did. But the problem was, or the catch was, we're reading all of these books of how to have the relationship, master-disciple relationship. But the goal was not to emulate the master or worship the master. The goal was to drop the ego. This is where the Eastern philosophy comes in. Okay. So if you're wanting to attain enlightenment or attain God, from an Eastern standpoint, you cannot have God and me. Me is the identity of self, the ego, because you can't be one with God and have two. right?
That's so what they say with the Buddha too. If you meet the Buddha, kill him because he can't be the Buddha. You have to do the same. So that's again the same idea.
And I have people who interviewed me and they said, "Oh, you've referred to yourself as the Buddhafield," and they wrote articles and whatever and said we were Buddha worshipers. No, we were not Buddha worshipers. Au contraire. We were a field of little Buddhas. Our goal was to attain what the Buddha attained to, not to worship him. Our goal was to attain what the Christ attained to, or any other elevated master that we have seen in history. That was our goal. And for me, starting at a very, very early age as a child, growing up a Catholic, I was enamored with the saints. I was enamored with their some sort of transcendental state that they could be in, where they could, they could allow, they could transcend their body and their mind so that they could also transcend suffering and transcend their body. So part of these disciplines, this is the twist, right? Part of these disciplines, like I was never, "Oh, master, I'm going to do what you say." I was a willing participant in the teachings because I was thinking, okay, if my ego is what is standing between me and my union with God, then let me first, we started this conversation with identities. So let me first identify the ego and all of the identities that come with it. So when you look at the movie Holy Hell, that's another reason why I wrote the book. You'll see us doing various exercises out in nature, right? And he doesn't have time to explain what we're doing, right? But there's one scene where we're running around in the forest and we're looking, and doing all these things. No, we were doing an exercise, and the exercise was be whatever, be a squirrel, be an eagle, be a wolf, be a whatever. Okay, and be that, actually become that, try and feel what it's like. And then after we would do that and explore that, we would say, okay, so what's the difference between an eagle or a wolf and a mouse or a squirrel? One is a predator and one is a prey, right? So then the question would be, when are you being a predator and when are you being a prey? So it was a true analysis of all of the various types of personas that we take on, because these are part of our developed ego, right? So if you don't understand what we're doing, we look like a bunch of nuts, right? But we're deliberately, it's not like he's standing there making us act stupid, right? We were allowing ourselves to drop who we thought we were and become something else just so we could explore it. We would even explore, like I remember one being a seaweed and being in the ocean and feeling, just like swaying back and forth and feeling the tide and feeling the whatever. And then also feeling that the ocean was being polluted. So what did that feel like? It burned and it whatever, right? So that we could gain compassion for our planet, for animals, for ourselves, for everything, right?
Yeah.
So these were incredible things that we were doing, right? It didn't, wasn't, you can't, one thing I say in the introduction of my book is there was 150 of us, and there's no doubt 150 different stories, but one common thing that we all had, you had to be there. Right? Because no one would understand really what we were doing or what it was all about without actually being immersed in it and experiencing it, not just observing it, but experiencing what we were experiencing.
That's an important point. But one thing I'm suspicious of when people say I think it's called Shakti, that the power, so that the person will give you the power. And I think like a teacher and somebody like Jesus is a guide, is a teacher, but is not going to give you the answers. The answers you have to figure out for yourself. It's going to show you, give you tools or show you a path. And I think that's also in Buddhism and various Eastern philosophies. That's the important point. But here, I think there's I have the answer and give it to you. I think that's where we run into trouble, perhaps.
See, And that's the problem. Excuse me, my cat is attacking me. That's the problem. When I first started, the whole thing was about the 4 techniques. And he would say, when I was initiated, he would say, this has nothing to do with me. I'm going to give you this technique. I'm going to show you how to do it. But imagine me like a midwife. I'm not giving you anything. This is inside of you, and I'm showing you how to get there. And once you get there, you're on your own, right? But a few years went by, right? And what he plagiarized everybody. So the plagiary, the Shakti, was from Muktananda. And he would study Muktananda, who was considered the Shakti guru, and he learned what that was about. So all of a sudden, and this happened, and I remember the night it happened, there were some initiates like us that were initiated that, after that, he had nothing to do with my meditation experience. He was not in the room. He was not there. He wasn't giving me anything. He had already given it to me, showed me how to do it. Bye. Right. So the elders that had the knowing, which was originally called the knowledge, which was stolen from Maharaji, he changed the word from the knowledge to the knowing because after his narcissism started to grow, he wanted to make it special. He didn't want anybody to have any connection with any other guru out there. So his little narcissistic wheels started to turn. So about, several years in, we're all sitting around at satsang. And after satsang, there was always something called prasad. And prasad is, food made in the love of God, whatever. And so we would go around to each person and have open eye meditation, which, as I say in my book, we would stare into each other's eyes forever, right? It was like, oh my God. But the point of that was that we were practicing when you're in front of somebody, be there with them. Don't be, here's some food, It's like really be there with them and really connect and really just get in there and be empty, right? So that's what prasad was. So we were doing prasad. And they would go and give him prasad, and then they'd move to the next person. And one night, probably after he had just thumbed through, Muktananda's book, one night he started giving Shakti. And a lot of us were like, the elders like me were going, okay, what's going on here, right? Now, I talk about this in the book. Most people were like, they would do it, and so did I. I never got anything from it. I mean, I never got anything from it. It was like, okay, I don't know what we're doing here, but I'll do it, right? But you would also see other people that were never initiated. So Arash, he stopped giving the techniques of the knowing after that. So for 18 years, he never gave anyone their own thing. That's when it went from connect to God's love to connect to my love. And I watched the metamorphosis of this narcissist bloom in front of me. And when he did that, I confronted him on it. I said, what's this connect to my love all of a sudden? And he said to me, well, Radhia, because that was his voice. Well, Radhia, some people, not you, and he would say that because he knew how to play me, right? Not you, but some people need a living master. They need someone they can talk to and feel and see. I am just being that for them, right? It was logical at the time. I didn't realize anyone was getting hurt at the time. And besides that, oddly enough, what are you going to do about it? Confront him publicly? You would be annihilated. Believe me.
And you would be annihilated. The community that was there.
And I did not want to lose the community. So I watched this progression of his narcissism build and get more and more powerful. And it wasn't, after a while, I said this to you before, I wanted to leave in 1995. I didn't leave until 2006. So 11 years I was confronted. And my friends today, they laugh about how angry I was. They would go, "Oh my God, Radhia," you would sit in the back seething. And I was like, "Really? Was I that obvious?" And they were going, "Oh yeah, you can't hide it, And what I was angry at him. I was like, "What is this bullshit display? I knew you when, dude. I knew you when we were just friends. Now you're acting like this big bullshit hotshot, and I'm seeing my community going for it. I'm seeing them all very much, what was scary, very much like South Korea. He'd say something stupid or whatever, and they'd laugh out loud and applaud. And I was like, whoa. And I was pissed, right? Because I was seeing their deterioration, and, after a while, when they would give him Shakti, they would go very similar to the snake handlers and the Pentecostals that writhe on the floor and do all of this stuff. That started happening. And it was bullshit. It was bullshit. It was mass hysteria. Don't misunderstand me. I do think that they think that something was going on, but if something was going on, it wasn't because he was giving it to them. It was because of their own internal experience. But I do see how there was mass hysteria, and the mass hysteria fed his ego. The more they acted out and writhed on the floor and cried and did all of that, the hotter he got.
It's contagious, too, among the other members, right? So it spreads.
Absolutely. And the thing was, you didn't want to be the angry person in the back, right?
Exactly.
With a scowl on your face, right? Being skeptical. You didn't want to do that. So some people, I had a few people, names will be not mentioned, who, they were initiated and they didn't feel anything. They didn't get anything. And I was an elder, and so some of them confided in me, right? And they said, "I'm really disappointed because I didn't, I just got this big initiation and I didn't feel anything." Then the next night I would hear them talk about their experience.
Oh, no.
And all they would do was mimic everybody else's. And like I said in my book, well, yeah, nobody wants to be the spiritual dud, right? Like, while everybody's experiencing all of these enlightened, heightened experiences, you don't want to be the one that, that's the dud that can't experience anything, right? So it fed itself. And that's how and as we fed each other, we fed him. And that's how it developed. And it took years, but oh my God, it was such a study in that mentality and how it happens. And it's complex. I mean, you can say, well, why didn't you say something or whatever? Well, you're right. I didn't want to be out of the community, and I didn't want to, he made sure that you doubted yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was his goal, is to make sure he's on his toes, to make sure you, if you've got any kind of question in your mind or hesitation, he wants to make sure, how do you know that they're not experiencing something? Right. Just because you're not, how do you know they're not? And who are you to tell them that they're not? And you're like, yeah.
Gaslighting too,
yeah, you've got a point, and it looked like they were really enjoying it and loving what they were going through. So who am I to throw this big wet blanket on them? I couldn't prove it anyway. And none of the guys that were being abused came forward. None of them came forward. And occasionally, like through the years, some people would leave. He'd annihilate them publicly. very similar to what Trump does, right? He would, ridicule them and annihilate them and say, how his terminology was, they'll just miss in this life, which was a horrible thing. I mean, in Eastern kind of philosophy, karma was a big deal. Yeah. And our goal was not to return, right? We didn't want to return to this very physical, painful world. So to miss in this life was one of the hooks, And so it's really complex of how a small group can develop into this sickness. Yeah. And we were all there. We were all there. Had nothing to do with intelligence or education. It's really complex. And it's complex psychology, And every time I would question him or do anything, remember, he made his living out of hypnotherapy, for God's sakes. So he had his talons in your psyche every week. And, you were spilling your guts of every fear, every skeleton in your closet, everything. So if I ever questioned him and came to him, he knew I had an abusive brother, I had an abusive father and whatever. He also knew that he could never be abusive to me because that would have been my line in the sand. So he became the opposite. He became the benevolent male. He became the good guy. He was like my older brother. And he treated me like that. He treated me very special. And he treated me like I was more intelligent. And, that's why he said, some people, not you, but some people, because he knew how to play me. He was my friend, right? But with somebody else, he would be violent to them. And somebody else, he would be a different way. He was a chameleon. He'd be whatever he figured out they need. And he could figure out what they needed because we told him every week, and paid for it on top of that, So it's complex. It really is complex.
Yeah, it's you had to be there, as you're saying, and the context is important, and seeing the nuances is not as simple as it seems, or they get much more complex. It's always an experience talking to you. It's always I learn new things, and our audience really appreciates it as well. And just Radhia Gleis, so glad to have you here again. Your book is The Followers, Holy Hell, and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders. And people can also find you on the 3rd episode of How to Become a Cult Leader on Netflix. Thank you so much.
Netflix. And also on Amazon. Holy Hell is still on Amazon, so you can check it out. So I really appreciate it. I always like to talk to you, Arash. Good luck to you and your program.
I'm looking forward to your next book.
Harder to fall. Okay, I will. All right.